Hi, everyone. I'm Natalie Gochner. This is Both Sides of the Aisle, and I represent the political center and have on the political right Representative Ryan Wilcox. Hi,
Good
Ryan.
morning, everyone.
And on the political left, Shireen Gorbani.
Hello. Hey, listeners. Happy you're tuning in.
Yeah, in studio together today. And I don't want to start with it, but I'm going to. We got closing arguments taking place in the New York City criminal trial for the, let's call it the hush money for Stormy Daniels. Shireen, quick take.
Well, now we are in deliberation. So when you hear this, audience, there may be a decision. There are, I think, 34 counts, and it's possible there could be a mix, right? So guilty on some, not on others. It could be a hung jury. Really, they just have to have one person who is not convinced by the arguments. But really, I do think the arguments were compelling. It was a pretty well-designed case with, I think, 19, almost 20 people testifying, that he had perpetrated misconduct, I guess we can say, on a variety of issues related to this payout to benefit him, right? So that he could be in
falsifying
office.
Business records, breaking campaign finance laws.
Yeah. And I think it's just, I hope people take this as a reminder of what's to come, right? This is a person who believes that the rules should be changed for him and will continue to have problems like this going into the future. Yeah. So I think it's a good question about kind of where we're headed if we have another Trump presidency.
Ryan, whether you agree with it or not, what do you predict is going to happen here? How does this play out? If he's guilty on some of these counts, what happens?
I think my answer is the same as it was a few weeks ago when we talked about it. I think people that have made their decision about him a long time ago, if they're comfortable with that, they also believe that most of this is political prosecution.
Yeah. So whether it's guilty or not guilty,
I don't think it changes any
people have
votes.
already made up their minds. It does affect the president, the former president, in my thinking, because he gets stamped if he's found guilty with a felony.
I just don't know.
I don't think you pass by that.
You don't? I just feel like it doesn't matter. I mean, the amount of conduct that he has shown us, the character that he has shown us. I mean, just what happened on January 6th should be enough, I think, for people. And if it isn't, I don't know that being a felon will.
Interestingly, I was in New York City last week and, spent some time just trying to sniff around, ask people questions. And it wasn't as big a deal there as I thought it would be.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, when it's just, a few blocks away that this big trial's going on and people just going about their business. So. Yeah, kind of interesting. Hey, let's talk about Nikki Haley and what she did recently, where she's basically saying, hey, I'll vote for him. I'll be voting for President Donald Trump, is her quote. This is speaking at an event with the Hudson Institute. And she basically said the president's not perfect, Ryan, but Joe Biden's been a catastrophe. And when I hear that, I agree on the border. I think there's some catastrophic things about what's happened. It's not that way on the economy, so it's not everywhere. But what do you make of what the former ambassador said?
I think that reflects a lot of Republican world, a lot of Republicans in America. What this president...
They'll hold their nose and vote for this guy.
It's a terrible choice. And this one is worse somehow. Which is almost unbelievable to say. Yeah.
I've had two conservatives who've kind of questioned that in my mind. One is Arthur Brooks, where he was once asked, do you vote for the person or the policy? Yeah. And he said, you vote for the person because policies, change and you can fix those. Yeah. And then President George W. Bush in Salt Lake City last week, and he made a big pitch about how the importance of the office, not the who holds the office. You got to protect the institutions. And I read that as him saying, don't put someone in there who's going to tear down institutions.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what we're in store for, right? Trump is basically saying he is going to work diligently with a more competent group of people around him this time to undo the very ties that bind our democracy. Like, he has said this numerous times. So again, I just feel like there's no bottom, there's no heroicism for me of sticking with your guy. There is a real and serious threat to this country with somebody of his character in power again.
Yeah. Shireen, you're going to love this one. Not really, but you'll love commenting on it. The former President Trump was asked in an interview, do you support any restrictions on a person's right to contraception. And he said, well, we're looking at that.
Yeah. So this is very concerning. So basically, coming out of the overturning of Roe and the Dobbs ruling, there were a number of hints, I would say, in those Supreme Court rulings that suggest that even birth control could be considered under attack in this country. And we're starting to see it, right? So some states, frankly, gratefully, not Utah in this moment, though I think people should watch and see what happens, but are moving to make it harder and harder to access things like Plan B or birth control, or having people have to go through additional hoops to get birth control when they want it or need it. Utah's actually moved in the opposite direction. It's much easier to access birth control here. You don't need a prescription. You can get it from a pharmacy. A lot of people don't know that. This is a very simple way that people can control the spacing and the future of their lives. And Trump has come out and said, well, I'm going to have a very good policy on this.
Yeah.
Right? Like, people are going to love the policy.
Ryan,
It'll be the best policy.
I think this is just clumsy policy thinking from the former president. I mean, he's not been someone who's had policy fidelity on anything, really.
That answer could be an answer to literally any question. He would say, yeah, we're looking at that. Right? People ask random questions all the time. But yeah, I mean, I think he wrote on social media, it says that, he'd never advocate imposing restrictions on birth control. That hasn't happened in Utah. He just confirmed that that's super easy here. There's literally no conversations on the Hill about restricting birth control.
Yeah. Okay, Ryan, let's stick with you for a minute and just ask you for a second. We're going to get some presidential debates. It looks like the candidates threw over the...
But not in Utah.
Yeah, they threw over the Commission on Presidential Debates, this nonpartisan commission, in favor of 2 debates, one in June, one in September, hosted by CNN and ABC. The first of these is June 27th. It's coming up.
The day after our primary.
Yeah.
Or is it? No, a couple days.
Couple days. Yeah. Well, so I'm happy they're debating.
Yeah.
Okay,
happy they're debating. That'll be fun, I guess.
I do like it when they do it, but I do find it, I kind of am with you. I don't think it changes minds per se. What do you think, Brian?
I think it has in the past. There's certainly, I remember the Walter Mondale thing. I remember, there's some presidential debates.
You had Nixon sweating on the camera against JFK.
Yes, yeah. And Reagan's, my favorite one from my childhood when he made the quip about how old he wasn't. I won't let your inexperience, I won't let them argue that against you or whatever he said. Mm-hmm. That said, now this is just going to be strange. I mean, I fully expect the current president to be amped up on whatever they put into him to keep him coherent during the debate. And I have no idea. None of us have any idea what the former president's going to say, which makes for entertaining television.
I think Biden has everything to win in a debate if he does it well. If he's able to have good recall, if he looks, well informed, if he's able to articulate his points of view.
Help people forget all the times when he forgot what he was saying in the middle of it the last 4 years.
It will help him if he can show that he's still got it.
Okay, but I just also have to remind people always, Biden has never been a person with a silver tongue. Like, he has been a person who creates a lot of flubs for decades. So this isn't necessarily new for him now. So, Brian, I know you want to say it's the last 4 years. I know you want to say that.
It's longer.
It's longer. It is. Well, it is kind of how he speaks. And I do think what I think I'm most interested in is who's got a vision for the future of this country. If you look at what Donald Trump has been truthing, I guess now he's not tweeting, everything that man says is looking back. I would like to know what we're going to do going forward. And I think Biden needs to do a better job of that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're talking about a president now that was literally ejected from the race in the past, in the 80s, for lying about everything in his campaign. That's the current president. And you have the former president who similarly struggles at times with telling the truth.
Oh, interesting.
So
it's a soft way.
Does it matter what they say? Is it anything beyond entertainment at this point? I don't know, because how do any of us have reasonable confidence in that they're going to do what they say anyway?
Yeah, I feel like many Americans are well read enough to know when they're being, lied to and when they're not. And so I think the debates do matter, and I'm excited for them. Okay, Celeste Malloy. She's been challenged by her GOP opponent to 13 primary debates. I guess it's one for every county in the district.
Yes.
Yeah. Shireen, that's a smart move by someone challenging her.
Well, so what's interesting is it was her move. So Celeste Malloy challenged her opponents in the special election, which put her in this seat, to something similar. And in fact, the slogan of her campaign, I guess I don't mean to laugh so hard, but is Celeste shows up. So now she has an opportunity for 13 primary debates around the districts. And this is actually something that I think does matter. When I ran in this district, and it's a little different now, but mostly the same. These counties had never seen, at the time it was Chris Stewart, actually show up on their door. I knocked doors in places like Bigwater on the edge of Lake Powell, around St. George, outside of St. George, all over Cedar. Like I was everywhere. I went to all of those counties, and people did not believe, like they couldn't believe that I was there asking for their vote. I think this matters when we're talking about places like Kane, Garfield, Wayne County. I would love to see them engage this way at a local level.
Ryan, Celeste, I've not really met her, but she strikes me as someone who's very intelligent, has a great background for the role. I feel like she's distinguished herself in her service. I think she should do some nice debates, show herself. She excels in this area.
Yeah, no, she's been involved for a long time, right, on the staff side. And including with the Utah Association of Counties, when I first met and worked with her the most in the past. She incredibly sharp. She can handle herself well in a debate. I wouldn't worry about any of that. I think this is more of just a political, every challenger wants to do this because they don't have name ID. They want people to get to know them. And this gives them a chance to stack up against that. And if you remember, we talked about this some time ago, you and I did, and I don't remember if it was on the air or not, but I do think that we should foster, if we want to talk about disagreeing better, this is how you do it. You model what that looks like.
Yeah.
Around the state.
Lots of places.
Yeah, lots
here.
of places.
Yeah. Hey, we're going to take a short break, but stay tuned. We're going to talk about Bravenel Hall and other interesting public issues in our next segment. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Both Sides of the Aisle on Utah Public Radio. We love to hear from listeners like you. If you would like to send us a comment, email bsotapodcast@gmail.com. That's bsotapodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Shireen Gorbani on the left.
Ryan Wilcox on the right.
Natalie Gochner in the Political Center. So grateful to be with my friends here on both sides of the aisle. I was so excited to hear the news reports that they're bringing the pandas back to the National Zoo.
Yes, they are.
This is a sign that something's working in this world. I thought that was such a blemish that our relationships with a major world power had gotten to the point where they were pulling their animals from our zoos.
Yeah, the pandas. Have you seen the pandas?
I have.
I have too.
Yeah.
I do. So it's a bigger nod to what's happening in terms of international diplomacy. But it's also so fun to see those pandas.
Yeah. Ryan, I also saw in Zoo News that there's a Hogle Zoo snow leopard that's expecting a cub in June. So I like that. Made me smile.
Snow leopard.
Yeah.
I feel like this could really tie into the hockey conversation.
But does it belong?
Yeah.
Does it belong to another country?
Yeah, I didn't think this. We could be the snow leopard.
We could be the snow leopards.
It's actually not a terrible idea.
That's not bad.
I'm really into big cats.
You heard it on both sides of the aisle first. Ryan, let's go to you. We have a former Utah Attorney General candidate who said to another candidate, offered him a job in exchange for an endorsement.
One, I'm still thinking about the snow leopards versus the Florida Panthers and how that would play out and which one would be better.
So this is former Republican candidate Trent Christensen, who's filed a police report with Murray City, alleging that his fellow GOP AG candidate Frank Myler, made this statement of, if you endorse me, I'll give you a position in the administration.
Yeah, which is a massive problem, given that that's explicitly illegal. To offer an opponent a job in exchange for not being your opponent. I'm bewildered by a couple of things in this story. One, that candidate Christensen waited a month. I think he said that he, sort of forgot about it and was scrolling through his text messages and then he decided, this should probably be reported. Yeah, dude.
Yeah, and he's the candidate that has not passed the Utah bar.
Right, that's correct.
So that's sort of an interesting side note.
Yeah, it's also strange that he waited until after he had endorsed another candidate in the race, which sort of colors this with a political lens a little bit more. He waited till after he had endorsed Rachel Terry, who who's wonderful. I love Rachel. But in any case, for someone to explicitly violate that while they're campaigning for the role of chief law enforcement officer of the state is a major concern.
Yeah. Shireen, you want to add anything here?
I just would say we have an alternative. It is
Derek Brown.
Well, but we also have an independent candidate, I believe. I don't think it's United Utah. Maybe it is.
No idea.
Michelle Quist is running for this.
Oh, yeah. She is United Utah this time.
She's United Utah.
Yeah.
So there is...
Smart lady.
She's a smart person and a person who I think would not get us into these returning quagmires that we see when Republicans hold this office. So there's an alternative, and I hope people will go out and take a look.
Yeah. I'll tell you, Derek Brown's someone who's always impressed me. Both his legislative service, his service with Senator Lee, his service with the Republican Party. So he's a serious
You will
candidate.
not find a better person than Derek Brown.
Yeah.
You want an antidote, hire the person.
Okay, Shireen, let's go to you first on this one. Our colleague, John Dougal, state auditor, had these 12,000 bogus trans bathroom ban complaints. And his staff had to go through 12,000 of these to find 5 that might have some merit. I think of public service and how the sacrifices you make to be in public service. And the whole idea is that you're doing really meaningful work.
Yeah.
And I think of these poor staff people that had to go through 12,000 of these.
Yeah, I think about that. I also think about the handful of children who are being picked up from school or being forced for their safety to try to not use the bathroom all day. Mm-hmm. This is the kind of government overreach that I think all of us should be concerned about. And I think it is a waste of resources. Yeah. It's a waste of your tax dollars. And we were just discussing before, we spent a little time out in rural Utah over the last few days. When you think about what we see, the kind of poverty, frankly, that is clearly transparent in some of our small towns across the state. And we're going to say that the biggest problem, or one of the biggest problems that requires this much time and attention from our legislature and from, those who have to go through and sort through these complaints, that's going to be the priority. Yeah, I mean, for me, when I think about, the fact that I was in the grocery store in Cleveland, Utah, the access to nutritious food that folks have there is not good, right? We think about the impacts that have on people's lives.
Yeah. Ryan, what Shireen's essentially saying is that the legislature spends time on an issue like this, and there's so many other really,
which
pivotal
is such
issues.
A silly argument, Natalie. Like,
well,
I mean, I love this,
really,
but because the time wasn't spent.
So
that's the argument.
And without thought.
It happened quickly.
Got it.
It was talked about for 10 months and for years before that. So when I'm saying that the time spent, it was designed intentionally to not take up the entire session. It was passed the first weekend of the session.
But you have to know the way that it impacts people's lives is ongoing.
Sure. And remember, why do you think that happens? What do legislators respond to? What do they respond to?
I think that they respond to, in this case, a trans hysteria that's being propagated across this country.
Okay, they respond to their constituents is the answer. The people that elect them, the people that
and I
call
guess
them.
The person who made that
them.
complaint was in Salt Lake County, was certainly not in Representative Brooklyn's district, and then ultimately
I'm not even sure
came
what complaint
forward.
you're talking about.
Okay, I'll tell you. It's the one in the Salt Lake County, rec centers, and she had a very reasonable request, and they were willing to accommodate that. And then the Salt Lake County government was told, "Oh, you don't have to deal with it because the legislature is going to come forward with this perfect proposal."
I remember that story, but that's not anywhere near the only story that was behind that. So that may have been the one that made it into the press. A bigger part of the problem here that we're talking about with the auditor's office is that you have a group of trans activists that are making 12,000 fallacious complaints that are intentionally bogging up the office.
My point is that if I was making a list of 100 things to spend our time on, 100 things to debate, 100 things to, put a lot of great policy thinking into, this would not make the list of the top 100. And you know what would make the list? And this is where I think Shireen's got a great point. Helping rural communities.
Sure. Way more time was spent on that than there was on this. But this is what gets the press attention.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, let's go to another one. We've got, Shireen, we got more than a third of Utah lawmakers who are in the real estate business.
Yeah, no surprise.
I mean, people say profit from real estate, but I like to think, no, it's how they
profit is evil.
It's how they make a living, and it's a hugely important thing in life.
Yes.
And I don't have a particular problem with this. I think one of the reasons that there's a lot of lawmakers in real estate is that real estate, you have flexibility. You sort of control your time, and you can do a part-time legislative gig.
Yeah, and I should say the roles are different, right? So we can be talking about people who are in contracting or construction, or we can be talking about people who are landlords, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a wide variety of what this qualifies as. But what I think we should be thinking about, right, is ultimately that we have, I think in your reporting, right, out of this center, we know that this is one of the 5th most expensive states for housing costs. We know that we have a housing deficit, right? And we also know that this is one of the worst places to be a renter. So there is a bit of a perfect storm around this ecosystem.
And that's exactly why it's so helpful to have them there, because they know the business, they know the industry.
Well, let's get some problems solved.
Ryan, do you see any problem with the concentration of real estate professionals in the Utah legislature?
12.5%, I think they said was the actual number, and then they extrapolate that. Well, there's some attorneys that also have real estate holdings or whatever, right? I don't know what that number is across the state of Utah. I was trying to Google it here real quick for the average Utahns. If you have real estate of any kind or any kind of an investment, my guess is that all of our portfolios have some real estate, or at least they should, especially in a growth market. So I don't know. It sounds to me like a lot of the Tribune trying to make something out of nothing, which is pretty normal.
But not every Utahn has a portfolio, let's be clear. And then additionally, I guess I would also like to say that you might know, Natalie, but when we think about the top jobs for Utahns, real estate is not it. That is not one of the top jobs, correct? Do you know what they are?
What do you mean by top jobs?
When we think about so if we thought about a representative cut of people across Utah,
I see.
You would think that we would see more people in, I know healthcare is a huge industry.
Yeah. School teachers.
People, I think the University of Utah, Intermountain Health are some of our top employers.
Sure.
Certainly those people come from a variety of backgrounds. But I do wonder what our what would it feel like?
Well, it's interesting with a part-time legislature because there's just so many professions that being in the legislature does not work for. I'm thinking if you're a truck driver, you're pretty hard. And what happens is that if you work for a company that values having you in the legislature,
they make it work.
Zions Bank's a great example of that. Intermountain Healthcare is another good example of that.
Yeah.
And so it's a tricky thing with a part-time legislature that way. But I'm just telling you that real estate professionals take big risks. Real estate professionals perform an important service. I'm grateful for what they do. I don't find it particularly troubling. Okay, let's go to Abravanel Hall.
Okay.
So Marisa Bravanel, just an amazing conductor for the Utah Symphony for so many years. My father-in-law played in the symphony for 42 years. It's in our family. It's going to cost $200 million, Ryan and Shireen, to upgrade, retrofit the Symphony Hall. I think it's a great investment to invest in the arts. I think it sounds a little too pricey for me.
Yeah.
I think they should value engineer this.
Okay, value engineering. I have a little experience with this coming from facilities at the University of Utah. Sometimes this means creating long-term costs, right?
Yes.
So there has to be a balance.
She didn't like that term, Ryan.
I know. I hate it too.
It's my business background that makes me like value engineering.
I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, there are some things like this, assets that are like a Abravanel Hall. It is our Symphony Hall, right? This is... If there's
where
going to be
inspiration
something,
happens.
you don't
and
go
even
there
beyond
for...
I saw John Prine there. I know you.
Oh, I love John Prine.
Yeah.
Yes.
Shostakovich. I just think of like all the different
Shostakovich. I love it.
Composers and music that we've heard there that you hope that would elevate. If there's anything in our state that we would invest in that would help to elevate the cultural aspects of our community, I would hope that we would invest there a little bit.
Yeah.
So and frankly, I can just blame this on inflation.
There you go.
Okay. Memorial Day has passed, but we want to each of us share a Memorial Day reflection. We don't have a lot of time, but Shireen, what's your Memorial Day reflection?
So mine is to check on the vets in your life. I heard a very upsetting report on Face the Nation this weekend that more post 9/11 vets have ended their own lives than died in service, right? And so when we think about this, the simple act of checking in on your vets and having those conversations is something that we can all do.
Yeah. Ryan, you've got a nice Memorial Day sort of experience.
So this didn't take place on Memorial Day. As an elected official, you get invited to a lot of ceremonies and different things, and I've given a lot of those. But a few weekends ago, Pleasant View City up in northern Utah invited me to the dedication of their Veterans Memorial that we've been working on as a community for 4 or 5 years. Since we broke ground. There have just been so many delays with COVID. We couldn't get the stone into the country and then into the state and just all of these things. But you're talking, this thing was built with $25 donations from throughout the community, and it is beautiful. And the beautiful part for me was the stories. This was one of those that I got caught off guard so many times. We ended up in tears listening to the stories of the father who served in World War II and his daughter as she got to raise the Navy flag in his behalf, and the father who's become a friend of ours who lost his son in the Coast Guard to cancer, who he got to raise the Coast Guard flag on behalf of Jared Reeves, his son. And they just showed up to be awesome and to help to honor those who had served in the past, and it was just a beautiful
Great
thing.
Memorial Day reflection. I'm Natalie Gochner with Shireen Gorbani and Ryan Wilcox. The program is produced by Anthony Scoma. Thanks, everybody, for listening.